Okay, so
Okay.
hi,
Hi.
how are
How
you?
are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Okay, so do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Anwesha. I work as an interaction designer at Google. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area with my husband and my 1-year-old daughter.
Okay, so before we talk about your job right now, do you want to talk about how you got to tech? It's like your education and everything that happened before that. I heard you did
Yeah.
architecture.
Yep, I did. So I did my undergrad in architecture in India. And once I finished that, I wanted to get my master's in architecture because I was really passionate about buildings and sustainable architecture in general. So I applied for my master's in the US. And I moved here in 2010 to do my master's in sustainable architecture from the University of Buffalo in New York. And when I was in first year of grad school that summer, I interned at an architecture company in Washington, D.C. And I realized that the real estate market in the US was really bad. It was really hard to find jobs as an architect. And even if you did, it was like the first few years was not as creative as I had hoped it would be. As a new architect, you're usually like responsible for really tactical job that I wasn't interested in. So when I went back to grad school for my second year of grad school, I started looking at other courses that were related to human computer interaction because I realized that, as an architect, um, you're studying about people and how people interact with three-dimensional spaces. And it was very similar to how you understand users who deal with two-dimensional spaces on the web. Um, so I started taking some courses in human computer interaction. And once I graduated, I moved here to the Bay Area. And I was looking for jobs both in architecture and in tech. But since I was in the Silicon Valley, it was so much more easier to find a job in tech. Um, and I started, my first job was at a startup. And I realized that at the startup, as a very new grad, I was still doing really creative work as a designer for that startup. I had a lot more ownership. Just a brief background on what that startup did. They helped hospitals optimize how to how to it was a hospital management kind of software, and I was the first designer on that company.
Wow.
um, so yeah, it was really amazing as a new grad because I had hoped that I would get to do a lot of creative work as an architect, but I wasn't. So just moving to tech and being able to design and get all that ownership right out of grad school was amazing. I learned a lot. I really learned on the job. And then I worked there for about a year and a half and then applied. I realized that I was the only designer and not really learning from designers who were more experienced than me. So I wanted to work at a big company that had like a bigger design team, so that I could learn from people who are more experienced than me. And that's when I applied to Salesforce. And I got a job there. And Salesforce had a really big design team. I learned so much from like really smart designers at Salesforce, and I worked there for about 5 years and then moved to Google recently, about a year ago.
Mhm. Okay, so could you talk about your current role, like what it means to be a designer and what kind of things you work on?
Right, yeah. So I'm an interaction designer,
Mhm.
and at Google, I work on the Google Ads team. There's a team that helps advertisers who are running ads on Google bring in all of their Google Ads data and be able to analyze it. That's
Yeah.
like a very high level overview of what my team does. So as an interaction designer, I work with product managers and engineers to build products for advertisers. And as an interaction designer, my role is to sort of design the experience for that user who would be using our product. And when I say designing the experience, it's not just about screens. It also like it also it's designing the strategy of the product. So as a designer, I partner with my product manager and decide like what our product strategy is for the rest. of the year or for the next 5 years. Then I work with the engineers to sort of define that strategy, come up with designs and build them. Um, so as a designer, you're really in, involved in the end-to-end user journey. It's not just about screens. It's like like thinking about the complete user experience. So although the name is interaction designer at Google, I would really call my job, I would really name my job as a product designer because I'm designing the end-to-end product experience.
Hmm. Okay, could you talk about like another product you worked on, like maybe at Salesforce or something, and like how you went through the different stages of it and got to the end?
Right. Sure. So I worked at when I worked at Salesforce, I was the lead designer on
Mm-hmm.
the Salesforce data visualization platform. So there was this team that decided to build in-house charting platform that every team inside Salesforce could use to like draw charts. So I was a designer on that team. When I started on the team, they were just forming the team. It was a new team. I worked with the product manager to define what our roadmap and what our goals for that product would look like. Then I came up with the designs and worked very closely with the user researcher to get user feedback on it. Um, User feedback is a really core part of being a user designer. You just don't design something and ship it. You keep on iterating on it by getting feedback from people who are actually going to use the product that you're designing. Um, and then working very closely with the engineers in the implementation phase. And once we built it, it was shipped, our users started using it. And it's a really interesting story because this was the first product that I had actually shipped at Salesforce. We worked on it for about 6 months, shipped the product, and while working on it for 6 months, we had gotten a ton of user feedback. We shipped it, and when our users actually started using it, there was a lot of negative feedback. They found it really hard to use. We got a ton of feedback, and that was really great because it helped us go back and iterate on it and make it better. So for the next couple of months, we really worked hard. We took all the user feedback, incorporated it in our design, and then launched a V2 in like 2 months, and that was received very well. So as part of a product development process, be it engineers, designers, or product managers, it's very important to listen to the user, get their feedback, and sort of iterate on stuff and keep changing. Like nothing is set in stone.
Yeah,
So that's one thing that I'm really proud of. One of the
that's,
projects
yeah,
that was really amazing.
it was. So most people, like when they think of a tech job, they think of like your classic software engineer, but obviously you're a designer, so it's different. So what kind of skills do you use in your day-to-day job that make it like different?
Right. So there are different phases um, that that like different steps or phases that a designer works on during the product development process. So I
Hmm.
can break it down and sort of talk about skills for different phases of the
Yeah.
project. So when you're starting on a new project, you're probably defining what the user goals are. Why are we even working on this problem? What does this problem, what are we trying to solve? So I personally start writing a design brief or a document to sort of define that process. So yeah, as a designer, you need to be good, not good at writing, but it's important to put what's in your head onto a document so that anybody could come in and read it and understand the problem that you're trying to solve. So that's step one. Once you define the problem, the team understands things better. Then I like to sketch out ideas and get feedback from my product managers, from the engineers, I mean the rest of the cross functional team. So again, a good skill set to have is sorry, I just lost you for a. Can
Sorry.
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's all fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. So yeah, so the second step is sketching. I mean, you don't have to be an artist to be able to sketch. The idea is being able to draw boxes and arrows to get your idea come across. So that's another skill, being able to like sketch out ideas. Then the third step is, once everybody is sort of on the same page about the design, you start designing stuff on screen. And for that, there are different types of tools that you can use. I personally use Figma. In the past, I've used Sketch and Photoshop. Photoshop is not used as much. I
Yeah.
used it when I started like 8 years ago. Most recently, I've used Figma. It's a great tool to
Mhm.
build wireframes and mockups and prototypes. And once that's done, um, I usually build a prototype on Figma or on Principle. I'm also familiar with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I'll put together a prototype quickly. Also, so that's another skill set. And the last skill set that I would say as a designer is to understand the language that your product manager and the engineering team is speaking.
Mhm.
What I mean by that is, when you're talking to the product manager, you should understand the business goals and the user goal that the product manager is coming up with. Um, an engineer is really, their skill set is writing code. So as a designer, you have to really understand their language and understand what they're trying to do, because they're the ones who are building what you're designing. So you don't have to have a deep knowledge of like the technology, but it's good to have some knowledge to be able to
Yeah.
have that conversation with the engineer. So I would say those are the four like high level goals, skills that you need as a designer.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I have one last question for you. So there's a lot of high school students like me that don't exactly know where to start, but they want a career in tech or in design.
Mhm.
So do you have any advice for them?
Ooh, that's a hard question. Um,
You can take your time.
yeah, let me think about it.
Mhm.
I don't know if this is the good advice, but what I can share it's not an advice, it's an experience that I can share that
Yeah,
helped me sort
sure.
of get into tech, which is trying out things.
That's definitely
Do
advice.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, like try out, do stuff. I wouldn't like a lot of the times we can sit and think about what we want to do, but that's not going to get us anywhere. I would say just get into it and start building something, start doing something. If you're interested in design, pick up a website, um, redesign it, think of a problem that you have, come up with a design to solve that problem. If you're interested in writing code, start building a website today. And once you start doing something, that's when you realize whether you like it or not, and if you're good at it or not. And there's nothing like being good at something or not. It's all about practice, and practice can only happen when you try something. So I would just based on my experience, my advice would be to do it instead of thinking about it. Get your hands dirty, get your feet dirty, and that's when you realize what's for you and what's not.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's it for today. You're the first designer I talked to, and it was really nice talking to you.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's it. I can end the recording now. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you for your time. This was awesome.
Yeah.